Hi guys, we've got a couple things going on today. We got about 5 more minutes and then I'm going to get started. I'm pulling up all of my windows. So go ahead and join in. Hopefully I'll see you soon. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started today. Today we're going to discuss fiction and start to transition into screenwriting. What I want to do is I want to begin with a PowerPoint that I will share with you right now. Maybe. All right. So now what you should be seeing is you should be seeing my screen. Like I said, today we are going to be doing our fiction webinar. We're also going to transition into screenwriting. We're going to cover fiction, the importance of fiction and short stories, strategies for reading fiction like a writer, your short story with a rubric review, workshop this week. I'm looking forward to screenplays, reviewing the portfolio requirements as those are still coming up. Then we'll get to some of your questions. I would like to say in advance that I did embed some videos this week. I'm not sure that's how the sound is going to work. I don't think that you will have to hear them through my microphone, but we can try that out. If you end up with no sound for a period of time while you're re-watching this, there is a link in the notes section of all of the PowerPoints so that you can watch them. I'm going to play them on YouTube or on the actual website just in case you can't hear them. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to listen to Neil Gaiman actually talk about the importance of fiction. Hopefully the sound will work for you.
Thank you, Miranda. It's important for people to tell you what side they're on and why, and whether they might be biased. A declaration of members' interests of a sort. So I'm going to be talking to you about reading. I'm going to tell you that libraries are important. I'm going to suggest that reading fiction, that reading for pleasure is one of the most important things one can do. I'm going to make an impassioned plea for people to understand what libraries and librarians are, to preserve both these things. And I am biased, enormously and obviously. I'm an author, often an author of fiction. I write for children and for adults. For about 30 years, I've been earning my living through my words, mostly by making things up and writing them down. It's obviously in my interest for people to read, and for them to read fiction, for libraries and librarians to exist and help foster a love of reading and places in which reading can occur. So I'm biased as a writer, but I'm much, much more biased as a reader. And I'm even more biased as a British citizen. And I'm here giving this talk tonight under the auspices of the Reading Agency, a charity whose mission is to give everyone an equal chance in life by helping people become confident and enthusiastic readers. A charity which supports literary programs and libraries and individuals, and nakedly and wantonly encourages the act of reading. Because they tell us everything changes when we read. And it's that change and that act of reading that I'm here to talk about tonight. I want to talk about what reading does and what it's good for. Once in New York, I listened to a talk about the building of private prisons, a huge growth industry in America. The prison industry needs to plan its future growth. How many cells are they going to need? How many prisoners are they going to be 15 years from now? And they found they could predict it very easily using a pretty simple algorithm based about asking what percentage of 10 and 11-year-olds couldn't read, and certainly couldn't read for pleasure. It's not a one-to-one. You can't say that a literate society has no criminality, but there are very real correlations. And I think some of these correlations, the simplest, come from something incredibly simple. Literate people read fiction. And fiction has two uses. Firstly, it's a gateway drug to reading, the drive to know what happens next, to want to turn the page, the need to keep going, even if it's hard because someone's in trouble and you have to know how it's all going to end. That's a very real drive. And it forces you to learn new words, to think new thoughts, to keep going, to discover that reading per se is pleasurable. Once you learn that, you're on the road to reading everything, and reading is key. There were noises made briefly a few years ago about the idea that we were living in a post-literate world in which the ability to make sense out of written words was somehow redundant. But those days, those noises are gone. Words are more important than they ever were. We navigate the world with words, and as the world slips onto the web, we need to follow, to communicate and comprehend what we're reading. People who cannot understand each other cannot exchange ideas, cannot communicate, and translation programs only get you so far. The simplest way to make sure that we raise literate children is to teach them to read and to show them that reading is a pleasurable activity. And that means, at its simplest, finding books that they enjoy, giving them access to those books, and letting them read them. I don't think that there is such a thing as a bad book for children. Every now and again, it becomes fashionable among some adults to point at a subset of children's books, a genre perhaps, or an author, and to declare them bad books, books that children should be stopped from reading. I've seen it happen over and over. Enid Blyton was declared a bad author. So was R.L. Stine. So were dozens of others. Comics have been decried as fostering illiteracy. It's tosh, it's snobbery, and it's foolishness. There are no bad authors for children that children like and want to read and seek out, because every child is different. They can find the stories they need to, and they bring themselves to stories. A hackneyed, worn-out idea isn't hackneyed and worn out to someone encountering it for the first time. You don't discourage children from reading because you feel they're reading the wrong thing. Fiction you do not like is the gateway drug to other books you may prefer them to read, and not everyone has the same taste as you. Well-meaning adults can destroy easily a child's love of reading. Stop them reading what they enjoy, or give them worthy but dull books that you like, the 21st century equivalents of Victorian improving literature. You'll wind up with a generation convinced that reading is uncool, worse. We need our children to get onto the reading ladder. Anything that they enjoy reading will move them up, rung by rung, into literacy. Also, do not do what this author did when his 11-year-old daughter was into R.L. Stine, which is to go and get a copy of Stephen King's Carrie, saying, if you liked those, you'll love this. Holly read nothing but safe stories of settlers on prairies for the rest of her teenage years, and still glares at me whenever Stephen King's name is mentioned. The second thing that fiction does is to build empathy. When you watch TV or see a film, you're looking at things happening to other people. Prose fiction is something you build up from 26 letters and a handful of punctuation marks, and you alone, using your imagination, create a world and people it, and look out through other eyes. You get to feel things, visit places and worlds you would never otherwise know. You learn that everyone else out there is a me as well. You're being someone else. And when you return to your own world, you're going to be slightly changed. Empathy is a tool for building people into groups, for allowing us to function as more than self-obsessed individuals. You're also finding out something as you read vitally important for making your way in the world. And it's this: the world doesn't have to be like this. Things can be different. I was in China in 2007, at the first party-approved science fiction and fantasy convention in Chinese history. Up until that point, science fiction had been very disapproved of because you couldn't tell if somebody was being disrespectful of the party or not when they wrote a novel about living in a giant ant colony. But now it was approved of. And I took a top official aside. I asked him why. I said, science fiction has been disapproved of here for a very long time. What's changed? It's simple, he told me. The Chinese were brilliant at making things if other people brought them the plans. But they didn't innovate, and they didn't invent. They did not imagine. So they sent a delegation to the US, to Apple, to Microsoft, to Google, and they asked the people there who were inventing the future about themselves. And they found out that all of them, all of the innovators, had read science fiction when they were boys or girls. Fiction can show you a different world. It can take you somewhere you've never been. Once you've visited other worlds, like those who ate fairy fruit, you can never be entirely content with the world that you grew up in. Discontent is a good thing. People can modify and improve their worlds, leave them better, leave them different, if they're discontented. And while we're on the subject, I'd like to say a few words here about escapism. I hear the term bandied about as if it's a bad thing, as if escapist fiction is a cheap opiate used by the muddled and the foolish and the deluded, and the only fiction that is worthy for adults or for children is mimetic fiction mirroring the worst of the world the reader finds herself in. If you were trapped in an impossible situation, in an unpleasant place, with people who meant you ill, and someone offered you a temporary escape, why wouldn't you take it? And escapist fiction is just that, fiction that opens a door, shows the sunlight outside, gives you a place to go where you're in control, or with the people you want to be with, and books are real places. Make no mistake about that. And more importantly, during your escape, books can also give you knowledge about the world and your predicament, give you weapons, give you armor, real things you can take back into your prison, skills and knowledge and tools you can use to escape for real. As J.R. Tolkien reminded us, the only people who inveigh against escape are jailers. Another way to destroy a child's love of reading, of course, is to...
You can watch the rest of the video on your own. There's also a link to the actual transcript of his speech if you want to just read or skim the second half of it. But I think what Gottman says is really important, that every type of fiction is important. It's important to children, it's important to readers, and it's important to writers. Now, let me go back to our PowerPoint. It's going to take me just a second to get back there because all my screens are full. And I want to talk about reading fiction. Here we go. So reading fiction. Again, when you're reading like a writer, you're not just reading to get information. You're reading to understand the text and the author's choices. To do this, you should start making connections. There's 3 types of connections I want you to start making if you're not making them already. The first one is text to self. So how does this relate to you? What would you have done in the same situation? Who or what does it remind you of? For example, I recently watched Dark Places. It's something that we've been talking about in the discussion board, and I realized that it was on Amazon, and I got really excited. It's Gillian Flynn, the woman that wrote Gone Girl. It's her book turned movie. So my example of a text to self connection is that one of the characters says he's interested in the massacre of Libby's family because she testified against her brother, and she made this sort of life decision when she was really young, thinking that she did the right thing. It turns out that Libby was wrong and her brother didn't kill her family, but the character is saying that he made a similar error as a kid when he thought he was doing right, which had horrific ramifications. Even if our mistakes as children, when we thought we were doing something right, and it turned out to have ramifications that maybe we didn't even understand until we were older, we've done something like that. Maybe not so horrible, but I can understand that idea. So that's my connection. I think especially because my parents were divorced, choosing to live with one parent versus choosing to live with another parent has huge ramifications, whether or not we're aware of it as a child or when we're children. The next type of connection is text to text. And when you're making that kind of connection, you want to consider what similar stories the story you're reading reminds you of, are the characters similar to other characters you've read about, things like that. So you're making connections between two texts. Again, with Gone Girl or with Dark Places, this book is similar to Gone Girl in that through it, the reader learns information as the narrator learns information. It's a really interesting point of view that Gillian Flynn has mastered. I haven't read many other books that are like that. It does also remind me they all sort of remind me of horror stories. They're dramatic, maybe they're a little bit too dramatic and not enough horror, but in that sense that everything that could possibly happen seems to happen. And the character always gets into a situation, the narrator, where they are literally stuck and they can't control what's going on. Now, my text-to-world connection. When you're making a text-to-world connection, you want to consider, what does this piece say about the world? How does it relate to world events? This happens in Dark Places because in some ways it's really hopeless, and also in some ways it, like I said before, the narrator physically gets stuck somewhere. I think that's what we're afraid of. I think that's maybe one of our biggest fears right now, is that number one, there's a couple fears that it addresses, but how big of a hole we can get into with money and how desperate money can make us. How, especially after the recession, I think that's really true. How a lot of times we think we know what the right thing to do is, but it turns out not to be the right thing. And then that loss of physical control or loss of control of money and the world and your life. I think that's something that we all fear, and what Gillian Flynn gets to in her stories, she really hits on that world fear. So when you're reading fiction, you really want to try to make those three types of connections. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to look at your short story rubric for a couple of reasons. Please note that in this picture of the rubric, I left out the mechanics section which is the fourth category of the assignment. I also just took a picture of what is exemplary, because I think that's what we're all aiming for anyway. So the first element is concept. This is the descriptive elements, characters, and imagery. What I want you to pay attention to is how similar the concept is from the main elements. The main elements refer to the specific assignment directions to verify the objectives of each activity. So here's the deal. So in concept, I'm looking for description. I'm looking for you to be really descriptive, describe those complex characters, make your setting believable, describe images, make sure that it's engaging and that it has a plot. For main elements, I want to be in the world of the story. If something, whether it's a misspelling or it's a detail that doesn't quite fit, takes me out of the world of the story, that's an error. Like when you're watching a movie that you're completely immersed in, or like when you're reading a story that you're completely immersed in, you're almost in that world, you almost forget the world around you. That's what I'm looking for in main elements, your ability to create a world. Now, the last element of the rubric is style. This follows typical or publishable genre conventions in fiction, nonfiction, memoir, poetry, and screenwriting. We actually haven't seen this before. This is where you need to be careful about your formatting. Remember that we are using MLA formatting and that you're going to have to revise your short story to fit into your portfolio. You're going to have to revise all of your documents. They're all going to need to be in MLA format, except for your screenplay, which needs to be, and we'll talk about it in a minute, in screenplay format. So here's what you need to do. Sophisticated, engaging utilization of the following. Strong, active language, specifically chosen vocabulary, or diction that leads to an importance of the piece, varied sentence structure, descriptive settings, poetic line breaks or forms as applicable, industry standard scene headings, description, dialogue, and parentheticals also as applicable. Okay. Now, the importance, just to remind you guys, you know that I love workshop. By now, you know that I love it. You've also been doing really well. What I want to see you continuing to do is to continue developing specific feedback. So pick a specific thing to respond to and then say, hey, maybe this is a way you could do it. You don't want to rewrite for the author, but you do want to give them specific suggestions. Also, make sure that you respond to someone who doesn't have any comments before you add on to someone who does have a lot of comments. It doesn't matter if you engage with the story or you like it or you dislike it. In fact, if you don't engage with the story, your comments might be really helpful because you could tell the person how they can help you engage. Now, we did that responding to everybody really, really well last time, and it shows how much you care about your classmates. And in that sense, I want to thank you again, and I want to remind you to make sure you do it this time. Now we're going to look at screenplays. I know that you guys are really excited about writing screenplays, and it seems like in this class, you actually run into the most problems formatting your screenplays. You're ready to write these because you're basically taking the voice of out of the fiction. I call it typo. You're basically taking the voice out of the fiction and turning it all into the voice of your characters and your stage directions. Because formatting is the hardest part, I found this video link to show you. Let me pull it up for you, and then again, I think the sound will work if I play it this way. But if it doesn't, know that there's a link to this in the notes section.
Hi, this is Jack Kim from Publishing, and this is How to Write a Screenplay in 3 Days Marathon Method. We're going to talk a little bit about formatting a screenplay. If you look on the screen there, I've got the first page of the screenplay, and I've already entered the title of it in quotes, Dr. Love, a screenplay by Jackie L. Young. So this is centered halfway down the page and centered between the outside and the inside margins. So it's centered in the middle of the page and centered between the top and the bottom. And it's in 12-point Courier. So, and you notice there's no page number on this page. This is in Word. And what I've done, I've inserted a break after the first page, and then I went in and I disconnected the headers. So if I look at the headers and do a view, header footer, you'll see at the very top here that header is not linked to the previous pages. And if you put a section break in and look at this header, make sure it's disconnected. There's a little icon here to link to previous. You click that, it'll disconnect it, okay? So after I did that, I went into insert page number, and here I have top of page, right, and the formats start with 1, start at 1. So that's how you do it in Word. Not the same thing in any application. You just don't want a page number on your first page. You want your page numbering to start on the second. The first page is a title page. I've also put in fade in caps. There's, on this scene, we're going to have a song, Dr. Love. Normally, you shouldn't be calling out your songs in your screenplay unless they really are specific or central to the theme. So this one is Dr. Love. This is a song that we need to have playing in the intro. And I've also, going back and looking at my paradigm when I was putting in scenes, I was thinking about a scene in the very beginning that shows Dr. Love as a boy in Italy. So I've added a scene here, and it's basically will show him as a young boy when he's about 5 or 6 years old. And you can see here I said young boy, and boys in capital. So when new characters are introduced, you want to put their name in caps, and you want to give their age. So we give it his age, a little bit of description, jet black hair. He's going to be much older. He's going to have gray hair, but when he was young, he had black hair. So we've got him dressed in a black suit. He's next to his father, again, that's in caps, and his mother's on the other side. So we're basically setting up this scene, exterior, graveyard, Italy, day. So we're going to insert here somewhere in Italy, 1945. That would be about when he was about 5 or 6 years old. He's in his later 60s, about 68 now, the character he's playing. So we're talking about a scene here where there's a lot of women in this graveyard, hundreds from the local community, and his grandfather had the same thing he was a great lover. So it's a tradition that's passed down from his father, from his father's father. They were all great lovers. And I started thinking about this early on. It was an idea I was playing with about something passed on from family to family. And we're going to find out what that secret is. There's a secret to Dr. Love, and we're going to find out what that is and later in the story. And I hadn't talked about it previously, so I know it's kind of new, but it's an idea I've been playing with. Anyway, so you're going to find things like this come up. You're going to get ideas anywhere along this process, like, hey, I just got a great idea. So anyway, we do a close-up, and we've got close-up on, some people use CU. I just use the word close-up, and on the boy's face, on the young boy's face, and then we're going to transition. So I'm using a transition 2, and then to the next scene, it's going to be the interior of Crown Brothers Publishing in New York, and it's going to be in day. And what we're going to do is transition from the boy's face to where he's much older, and he's in this office with these guys talking about something, and we're going to focus in on, we're going to zoom in on Dr. Love's face, and that's where we're going to start the story. We're going to transition from that first scene that had the music in the background. So, and in this scene, we're going to be talking about the problem that the publishing company is having. And this was talked about earlier. I talked to you about this. He needs to sell more books. He sold 500,000 on Oprah. The publishing company is saying, hey, look, that was a peak. It's gone. We need a new strategy. And they're actually talking about how they're going to get the average Joe to take on this challenge. So this is something that pitched the show. So the show didn't think of it. It was the publishing company that came up with it and gave it to the TV talk show host. Say, hey, challenge the guy. We want, to have him, train this, the world's greatest lover. So it was really a strategy or publicity stunt that they came up with. It wasn't something that, David Letterman came up with. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about.
Okay, so because yours don't have to be very long, I just wanted to give you some examples of how you should begin your formatting. Now, this guy does have a series on. He does have a series on how to write a screenplay in 3 days. If you'd like to read or listen to a few of his other resources, I think they're really good. I think they're fun. His voice is nice to listen to, and he does a good job of explaining how to write a screenplay, how to format a screenplay, and he uses great examples. So you might just want to look into that. Now, let's go back to our PowerPoint. Of course, it'll take me just a minute to pull it up. Thanks for bearing with me during these screen switches. I know they can be annoying. Okay, so just a quick look into your screenplay. You have sort of the same things that you have in your short story. Specifically, you have concepts, so voice, characters, and plot. Then you have main elements, so check the elements of that assignment, make sure that we see the characters, make sure that we understand the narrative in with content. Make sure it's not too cliched. That's a little hard for screenplays, but so be new and interesting. Also, make sure that the spelling, and punctuation are consistent with your format and your grammar. You also want, in this format and mechanics section, sorry, not format and grammar, format and mechanics. In this section, make sure that you use that appropriate formatting for screenplays. It's not worth too much in the grand scheme of things, but we just watched that video, so hopefully that will help you. So, here you go. Here is that rubric. I'll give you just a minute to look at it. All right, now what I want to do is look at your final portfolios. I know that we've gone over this on every single thing, but this is what we're building up to. So I want to make sure that the expectations are really clear. Make sure, again, what you're going to do is you're going to create a cover page with the creative portfolio title, whatever title you want to title it. I would prefer you come up with something other than creative writing portfolio. Then you're going to put your name, course number, and contact information. You should include a table of contents so it's easy for me to flip through your portfolio and see what I need to see. Then you're going to do 2 assignments of your choice. So make sure that you pick and start revising those 2 assignments. You are welcome to email them to me if you would like for me to look over them one more time. Then what you're going to do is the last thing you're going to include is a 2 to 3 page, which is a little long. It's about 500 to 750 words. Author biography. This should be written in third person and should be informative and engaging. If you want some tips for what to include in that biography, you can include your hobbies and your interests. You can include where you usually work, as in like usually sit in your kitchen table after your kids have gone to bed. You can also include your academic successes and your career successes. Give us sort of a whole idea of who you are and how this portfolio reflects that. Now, I had a really good question emailed to me. I would like you to continue emailing questions through me throughout the term, and especially for your screenwriting, for your screenwriting and for that webinar. Here's the question. The question was about length requirements. This is actually the second time this came up. So the question is paraphrased. How do you fit enough information to make a good story in such a small size, whether it's your creative nonfiction piece or your fiction piece or your screenplay? First of all, it's hard and challenging to do it. The assignments are short because we want you to limit how much you're writing in 8 weeks. The assignments are also short because they make you focus. A lot of times it's easier to write a novel than it is to write a poem or a short story, as the case may be. You have to be very, very specific about your word choice. Make sure that every single word is important. You also want to think about the reader. Don't worry about what you need to know or what you want to say. Worry about what the reader needs to know and needs to learn about. So think about the details that will make the story better for your reader. Also, consider what is the most important part of the story. A lot of times when you start writing, you've got this moment, I call it like throat clearing. So you have this moment of throat clearing where you go, and you get started and you kind of set up the scene, and it's maybe a couple sentences long, and it's just you getting ready. Cut out those first couple sentences if all they are throat clearing, and then focus on the action, focus on the actual narrative, focus on your description. That's one really good way to do it. The other thing is that in these stories, they don't have to come to a perfect wrap up or a perfect ending. You might just leave them. You might just end the scene and leave it for your reader to think about. Of course, if you do that, make sure that it's logical and it's not just some huge cheesy cliffhanger, okay? So make it meaningful. Try to focus in your story a little more. Think about a camera lens. If your camera lens is broad and you're seeing this whole big panorama and you're trying to take a picture of dogs running about 100 feet away from you in the very, very middle, it's not going to turn out to be a good picture. You want to zoom in on that most important work. All of that being said, those are great things to think about, but all of that being said, you should also know that I am not very strict about word count. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I'm not super strict about word count. Make sure you do not go over the limit by more than 250 words. That's one page. Don't go over it by more than that. If you go over it by more than that, you need to rein it in, bring it back, make sure that you're being specific and not just overly wordy, okay? Please, again, let me know if you have any more questions. I'm happy to answer them. Just as a review before we finish up, this was what we covered today. We talked about fiction. We talked about the importance of fiction and short stories, including watching Neil Gaiman's kind of defense of fiction and defense of all types of fiction for young readers. We looked at strategies for reading fiction like a writer, and then we reviewed your short story rubric. We went over this weekend workshop and some of the best practices for that. We also looked forward at screenplays. We looked at formatting them in a YouTube video, and then we talked about the specific requirements of your screenplay. We reviewed those portfolio requirements because that's what we're building up to, and then I went over one of the questions that was emailed to me earlier this week. Beware that I embedded videos in this presentation. I'm pretty sure that the sound did go through, but just in case it didn't, there are links in the notes section of the PowerPoint. Since there is no one actually viewing this, and I understand that that's a problem, however, this is the first time that we're doing webinars for English 226. When I made the decision, let me just tell you, when I made the decision to, at the beginning of the semester, to outline when every single webinar would be, I actually thought that perhaps it would be more convenient if you knew at the beginning of 8 weeks when those would be. Turns out that it's not. However, we're going to stick to it. Please email me questions in advance, especially if you can't be here. The video will be available for you, as will the PowerPoint. I look forward to hearing back from you and working with you in the discussion board this week. Thanks. Bye.